Thank you very much indeed, Misha. It's great to have you here. You'll see I'm also joined by my colleague Richard Cuthbertson, and Richard is another faculty member, and Richard and I spend a lot of time teaching together. And because this is not a really typical taste of the MBA, because it's not as interactive as it would normally be, I've got Richard here who's volunteered at relatively short notice to be a kind of proxy for you. So I'm hoping, Richard, as you go through, you'll be able to heckle and moan at me in the same way that a room full of students would.
No problem.
Okay, so Richard teaches with us in the operations area at the business school and co-teaches the course on corporate turnaround with me, as well as being a leading expert on retailing. Do you want to say just a little bit about your work and what other things you get up to, Richard?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I've got a similar background to Steve in that I originally went into industry, worked in automotive, the energy industry, and then into consultancy, eventually with a lot of retailers. And from there, really developed my research into retailing, and then joined the school a little later than Steve, as he will tell you, no doubt. And I'm really focused on those areas that are being disrupted by digital innovation.
Okay, so that's good. Yeah, Richard's reference there is the fact that I'm very nearly now the longest standing member of faculty. There's a handful of people who have been at the business school longer than I, but only a few. So I've had the great honour of teaching just about every cohort of students we've had through since we started in the mid-1990s, which is now a very long time ago. But it does have the advantage that I've seen a lot of folk come through, and I think I've got an interesting, I think I've got a bit of a grasp anyway on the types of things you might want to get a feel of now. So in your situation, what I'm going to guess is what you're really interested in is what's it like to be at the business school. And in the session we've got this afternoon, we can't really replicate that because either in person or online, we would constantly be making of interaction and discussion with you. And I mean, that's difficult for us to do in this setting. In particular, what I would normally do on an open day session, if we were not teaching it virtually, would be to put you into groups and you'd have the experience of meeting each other. And as it is, you're going to find that difficult to do. And those of you who are watching this, the recording of this, obviously won't be able to participate in any way other than just in a passive way. But we're going to do what we can. And so I'm going to start with a question for you. And there's method in my madness because we're going to work towards doing a case study which is connected to do with the university itself. And I'll explain what that's going to be. But I'm going to start off by asking you a question. And to do this, we're going to use a thing called Mentimeter, which means I'm going to put a web address in the chat in a moment. And it's menti.com is the place you've got to go to. And I'm just going to do that now. It's menti.com. And when you get there, it'll ask you for a code number. And the code number I'd like you to type in is 907795. So that's I'll just put that in the chat now. So it's menti.com, and the code number you want is 907795. And I'm just going to share my screen.
That to all the panelists, but not the attendees.
That's very good. I will send that again.
So I've got it, but nobody else has.
That's why you're here, Richard. So open me to do that. Right, there we are. I think that's gone to everybody now. And what I'll do is I'll share my screen so you can see what that will take you to. Oh, no, not that. There we are. So my question is this. It's just, what is different about Oxford University? And so this is a question which is going to lead us into some of the things we're going to talk about in a moment. But this is my opening question. Good. Focus of studies. Thank you. The first person, whoever you are, first person who said focus of studies. That's a wonderful answer. Thank you very much. Focus on social impact. Very good. Focus on impact organizations. Very good. It's long history indeed. Yep. Diverse student body. Reputation. Good. Yes. Good. I hope so. Caliber of learning. Brand name. Focus. Yes. Good. Now I should scroll, I think, in a second as we start going down. world renowned, truly international, very good. Let's have some more social political leadership. Well, I'd like to think that would be true. Networking opportunities, certainly true. Reputation again, yes, thank you. Now, this one in green is going to scroll up the screen again in a second. It's a collegiate university. That's actually the bit I'm going to try and get to in a minute, because that's at the collegiate system. Yeah, college experience, faculty, very good. Okay, thank you very much for that. These are all excellent answers. And we're going to pick up on some of these things. I'm going to pick up on a couple of things on the screen at the moment there. Interdisciplinary focus, college culture, yep, very good. Very good. Expertise, very good. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. You can stop if you've already entered. That's great. But if you haven't, you can probably stop that now. What I'm going to do is switch my screen again now to. I'm going to take that off for a second, because I'm going to go back to a presentation now, and.
They were all true, Steve. I didn't see anything that I disagreed with.
No, okay. So this is our sample lecture, but because it's not really, we don't really have lectures in the way that other places might. So this is our proxy for something that was a sample session anyway. And let's just think a little bit about the University of Oxford. We've got, it's divided up into divisions. So it's like lots of large companies divided up into different sections. There's humanities, social sciences, etc., medical sciences. Now, Richard, here's a question for you. Do you know what GLAM means?
Oh, I do know what GLAM means, but how embarrassing. We just refer to it as GLAM.
GLAM, it's an unhelpful acronym, but what it means is
gardens and the museums.
Oh yeah, gardens, libraries, and museums. Yes,
that's it.
So, I mean, the business school is part of the social science division, and this, in this regard, the University of Oxford is just like every other university. It's divided up into divisions, and the business school lives in one of those divisions. And we happen to be in social sciences, along with economics and law and sociology and other people like that. But what is different about Oxford, as some people have pointed out on the chat and through the Mentimeter rather, is that we've got all these colleges here. So there's a number of colleges. I'll come back to that because it depends on how you count, but there's a number of colleges, and there's roughly about 40 of them. I'll say roughly about 40 of them because, well, I'll explain the things in a minute. But one of the interesting things about these colleges is mostly they're independent of the university. In other words, they're not controlled or owned by the university. There is a bit of two of them actually are controlled and owned by the university. Richard, this is another question for you. Do you know which two?
St. Cross and which is the other one?
Kellogg.
Kellogg, of course.
Kellogg. St. Cross and Kellogg are technically, legally part of the university, but the other colleges are not. There's also some ones called the permanent private halls, which are kind of religious establishments where people train to be religious ministers of one sort or another. But they also take conventional students, including in some cases MBA students. And there's a dotted line one there for the new college that's just been announced, founded in the last few months, which is called Reuben College, which doesn't really exist yet, but it's just coming into existence as we speak. But of these other colleges, now what these colleges do is they provide accommodation, but they're also communities for students to live in. And for our undergraduates, they also provide the teaching. So they provide the small group tutorial teaching that we give our undergraduates. Postgraduates, like the MBA students, are all members of a college. So if you come to Oxford, you'll be a member of one of the many colleges. And you can divide up the colleges. Actually, these are the ones we're going to focus on here. 4 of them just take graduate students. The rest of them are take postgraduate students like MBAs and undergraduates as well. They're mixed colleges. But there's one which doesn't take any students, which is a kind of anomaly, historical anomaly, All Souls College, which just has scholars. And it was founded with so much money when it was originally founded hundreds of years ago. They've never actually needed to teach any students. So that's interesting. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because in a moment I'm going to ask you to do a case study which is based in one of the colleges. And what we're going to think about particularly is the funding for the colleges. So here's a typical college, and it gets money from 5 different directions. There's the fees, student fees. It gets from the students, it shares those with the university, very complicated cross-charging arrangements. But so some of the money that students come, like MBA students, when they pay their fees to the university, some of that ends up in the colleges. There's the hotel charges for the accommodation and catering they provide. There's also lots of the colleges have got lines of extra business they use in vacations, for example, renting out their spaces, for conference facilities, or they have other types of trading activity. My own college, for example, has a quite a significant business in doing English language training for mostly Chinese and Japanese universities. Although in the current crisis, COVID crisis, that's taken a bit of a hit. We get donations mostly from alumni. And there's also this bit which is endowments, or really, well, I should say more accurately, it's endowment investment income. And what that is, well, we'll explore what that is in a moment. But now, Richard, have you got an idea of what the split is for a typical college, of where the income comes into the colleges?
For a typical college?
Yeah, well, that's a great, you've answered the question by the tone of voice, because all the colleges are a bit different about how they operate there.
What is a typical college?
I've got the figures for Hertford actually here. So Hertford College is my college.
Steve, I think it's worth saying as well that all faculty are members of colleges, almost all faculty.
Almost all faculty, yeah.
And so you and I, for example, are members of different colleges, even though we're in the business school. No,
it's a very interesting thing, isn't it, that we're part of 2 communities all the time. So what's the wonderful thing about being in Oxford is you're part of a business school community, but you're also part of a college community. I'm at Hertford College and Richard's at Green Templeton College, which is one of the graduate-only colleges. And this is the figures anyway for Hertford College. As you can see, we get quite a lot of money. 20% roughly comes through trading and conferences, our kind of entrepreneurial activity. But we get about 20% also from the investment income in the college, which is money that we've accumulated over the years and put into a pot. And the important thing is we never spend this money. It's become money that's just there to the interest that we generate, the income we generate from that pot of money is something we use to pay the gas bill and so forth, but we never actually spend the actual endowment. And the colleges vary quite a lot in how much endowment they've got. And generally they've got it in 3 categories. They've either got equities, shares in companies, fixed income things, which are bonds. Essentially it's where we get income from having loaned money to governments or companies, and property. So my college actually doesn't have any property at all, but some of the colleges own farms and commercial buildings and so forth, and have a stream of income from that as well. So that's the shape of it. This is from a Guardian newspaper article a couple of years ago, just because it was a nice graphic, but it gives you an idea. So the university has its own endowment, but then the colleges have their own endowments too. St John's is the wealthiest of the colleges. Harris Manchester is the least wealthy by this score. So this is the amount of money that's sitting there generating income, which the college can use to spend. And just you can see there's quite a big spread. So St John's College is phenomenally wealthy. It's accumulated a lot over the years. And Hertford is well, that's where I am. You're down here, and you're all the way down here, Richard. Don't feel inferior.
We can talk about how you calculate the endowment if you like.
No, that is also complicated. And of course, Green Templeton was formed by the merger of 2 other colleges, Green College and Templeton College, a few years back. So as a Green Templeton, relatively short-lived. But anyway, Hertford College, that's where I am. And one of the things I've done over the years, being a management fellow in the college, is I've served on the investment committee of the thing. Now, in the way that people have done these things in the past, how do you manage this endowment? Well, if you think at the top of my diagram here, in fact, I think it should be, let's look at this one here. At the top of the diagram, you've got the college there, lots of little blue bobs there. They're supposed to be the fellows of the college. And one of them is nominated to be the investment bursar and they read the Financial Times every day and invest in the stock market. I mean, that's what used to happen. It doesn't happen like that anymore. But when I arrived in Oxford in the mid-90s, this was quite a common model, Richard. People would, there was the economics fellow at Hartford who's was now long retired and died, unfortunately, but he was a brilliant man, but he used to go to coffee in the mornings, read the Financial Times, and then go on the phone to the stockbroker to say, buy this and sell that. Extraordinary way to do it. Nowadays, people don't do that. Nowadays, what we have is an investment committee. And here's my graphic coming back again here. And what that investment committee does is subcontract the management of the college finances to a firm of stockbrokers or a bank who manage the money for us. So we don't actually take the direct investment decisions anymore. We kind of subcontract the decision making about how exactly to invest the money to a firm of external people. Have you ever been on the investment committee at Green Templeton, Richard?
I haven't, but I was vice principal at Green Templeton and therefore got heavily involved with the investment committee.
Yeah, so it's quite a big challenge because there's quite a lot of money involved. So in Hartford's case, for example, it's nowhere near like St John's, but it's about 60 million, 80 million, in that bracket, depending on how you count exactly. Yeah. Anyway, that leads me to what we're going to do now, which is that I'm going to just stop showing my screen for a moment, and I'm going to ask everybody to read a short case study. It's very, very short, only 2 pages long, but I'm going to ask you to have a read of the case study, and then we're going to talk about the your interpretation of it. So the case study I'd like you to read is, I'm going to post 2 links to it, and the first of the, I've done this twice in 2 different ways, so if one doesn't work for you, the other one should work. You'll see there is tiny URL .com FJP 2020, or if that doesn't work for you, you can try this one here, and so one of those 2 links should work, and that will get you a 2-page PDF document, and we're going to have to give you some time to read it. Now, this is an awkward bit, Richard, because in class we'd be able to see how long people took to read it, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would.
Now, how are we going to do this? I think the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask you on the chat that once you've finished reading, if you can just send a message saying yes or done or tick or hello. Or
participants can put up their hands, Steve, if I'm right.
Is that correct?
Yeah, certainly. Lucia has, for example, just now.
Ah, well, okay. Well, that's very good.
There you go. They're putting up their hands.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, okay. So anyway, take a few minutes now. I guess it's going to take you about 7 or 8, 10 minutes to read that document. And while you're doing that, Richard and I will just sit here looking beautiful. I've not really thought of an activity for us to do while this is the case.
Well, it's very tempting to talk about the fact that, it's very common in an MBA class to have something to read beforehand.
Yeah.
That you then have to discuss in class. But obviously, us discussing that is going to distract people from reading the case study.
Yeah, I think we should have a self-denying ordinance for a few minutes, Richard, and we'll just kind of sit here and look at each other for 10 minutes while people are reading. I'll tell you what we will do. We'll turn off the recording for a second while we do that. And they're much longer. And typically an MBA study involves a lot of case study work. Some business schools around the world use case studies universally to teach everything, like Harvard, for example. At Oxford, we take a much more broad approach. We use different types of case studies and different types of teaching. But case studies are a pretty common way of doing it. And generally, the pattern of having a case study is you discuss it in a group. That's a crucial issue. And here it's a bit artificial because we're asking you to look at this on your own, and that's a much harder call. Now, I should say about this particular case study, although it's kind of
Just to interrupt, Steve, we should say that even when we're teaching online, they would be talking about it within a group. We'd put them in a breakout room and they talk about it within a group.
Yeah, we're not
Just
able
on
to
this
use
particular occasion.
that breakout functionality for this session this afternoon, but that's what we would like to do. And thank you for whoever remembered just to start recording again.
Yeah,
and thank you for those people who started adding in thoughts into the chat as well. We'll come back to some of those thoughts. So thank you very much, Lara and Jaya, for doing that. If anyone else wants to add in their thoughts, that'll be very helpful as we go through. Let me just tell you about this case study. It's fictionalized. Obviously, there's no such place as Newton College, and Farrington Janes is a made-up company, but there is a real company behind this. And at Hertford College, on the investment committee, I sat through this exact presentation. And in fact, I have changed the numbers actually to, I did it this morning to make them more up to date, 2015 onwards. But actually when this actually happened, this actual event, the numbers I used in the original version of this case were exactly the numbers that a famous investment bank, Richard, you definitely know the name of the bank if I told you who it was, and someone very prestigious, were making the presentation to us at the college. And they put up that slide, although I've obviously changed the names. And when this happened to me, it caused me to think quite hard about the sorts of things that we do and what's that going on. So what I'd like to ask the group again is to go back to the Menti page. So this is back to the same Menti page, the same code, and you should find a new question there. So this is, I'll put it back in the chat box again. So it's menti.com, and it's and my question to you this time is simply, what happened here? What's your interpretation of the story? So you have to do it in a few words because Mentimeter doesn't let you write a whole essay. So just as succinctly as you can, what do you think the best way of describing what's happened has just happened here? And I'll show the screen again so we can see what people have said. Yeah, now the person in the blue box there, you're cracking out, I don't know who you are, but you're a great candidate. Oh, your prospects of being on our MBA are very high because you got to the nub of this very quickly. The firm's 5-year return rate is actually lower than the investment rate. And the point is here is, although if you think about adding up the deltas of the difference between the Farrington Janes numbers and the charities investment index, which we're going to presume is some kind of benchmark for the charity sector. Although if you add it up arithmetically, it looks as though Farrington Janes have done a bit better than the benchmark. If you actually do it multiplicatively, if you start at 100 and then work out what you'd have after the first year and then the second year and then the third year, etc., it turns out that what Farrington Janes have done is put up a slide which has shown them that shown the audience that their performance is just isn't as good as the benchmark index. Now we can presume that the benchmarks index is something with very low risk, and so presumably there's not a reason why if Farrington Janes were offering something that was much lower risk, perhaps you could say, well, that's okay to get a lower return. But let's presume for the moment that an investment index is going to be a low risk benchmark. What Farrington Janes have done is put up a slide which says that their performance is not actually that great. And that's a kind of interesting issue to explore. They're saying that they've gone to make a sales pitch, and their selling point is you do better without us. Have you ever seen any sales pitches like that, Richard?
Yes, I have, unfortunately. I think one of the interesting things about business, and one of the things that students come across a lot in business schools, is that you think it all runs perfectly and that everybody thinks about what they do. They have time and resources to do everything well, and therefore mistakes like that wouldn't happen.
Yeah, no, I think that's, you'd imagine that mistakes like that wouldn't happen, wouldn't you? You'd imagine that people wouldn't screw up like this. But one of the extraordinary things is that quite sophisticated companies do screw up all the time. And in this case, it was a moment of high embarrassment. In fact, it wasn't the professor in the actual real case of this that pointed it out. It was a very young, recent graduate of the college who was helping us by sitting on this beauty parade for the investment managers. And he just pointed it out, and the team who were presenting were just gobsmacked that they'd done something so daft. And that was pretty alarming, really, I think, to see that that's the case. Let's go back to the PowerPoint for a second here now, and I'm going to just share my screen again. And now let's look at this slide here. So just so that everyone's on the same page, if we took £100 and invested it in Farrington James, then by the end of 2015, we'd have £100 minus 4.9%. And then we'd get the following year a very healthy 24.8%, but on that reduced number. And so when we're thinking about these investment numbers, what we've got to do is multiply through rather than simply add up. That's the trick with this. And this shows that Farrington James have not been successful in beating the investment index. So when you've got this kind of embarrassment going on, this is it's tricky, isn't it? Let's just go to the thing that the professor mentioned about the efficient markets hypothesis. So if you've not come across this, and many of you will, but some of you won't have come across this before, it's an idea that the markets that work for stocks and shares are incredibly effective, and the technology and the institutions are such that information can be shared very effectively, so that share prices reflect all the information there is available about that particular company. And any information, new information that one party has will find its way into the complete universe of people who are buying and selling shares instantly, and so will be absorbed into the price. The only exception to this would be where someone's behaving in a criminal way, doing insider trading, and that's illegal. And so insider trading accepted, the idea is that the stock markets are what the economists have called, it's a technical term, efficient, and that means that the information is spread available. And there's two angles to this. There is a very complicated and detailed version of the efficiency markets hypothesis, and if you come to do an MBA, you will learn about this in much more detail and much more mathematical detail. But here we're okay with quite a kind of a hand-wavy explanation at the moment. There's two implications from this that are quite interesting, one of which is that if there's information about a company that comes into the marketplace, then it should be absorbed instantly into the share price. And secondly, if someone develops a new trick for investing in the stock market, that too will actually not give you the long run advantage. And the reason is that if you can work out a trick, then almost certainly somebody else can work out the same trick. And so the idea that you could find a way of beating the stock market in some clever way that nobody else has thought of doesn't make sense, given the fact there are so many people around the world who are investing so much amount of money and effort to try and do exactly that. So you might maybe have a great idea that you think no one has ever thought of, but the thing is probably someone has thought of it. It's quite it reminds me of a joke, Richard. Have I ever told you a joke in these sorts of lecture situations,
You've
Richard?
never told a joke in a lecture, Steve.
This is my one of my favourite jokes about economists, Richard, and it kind of reflects the efficient market hypothesis. There are two economists walking along the road, and one of them sees a pound coin on the floor and says to the other economist, "Oh, look, a pound coin on the floor." And the other economist says, "I don't believe you." And the economist says, "Well, why not?" And he says, "Well, because if there was a pound on the coin, someone would have already, a pound coin on the floor, someone would have already picked it up." So thank you for your grudging laughter there, Richard. Yeah, but
I'm
that's
asking on behalf of everyone.
Thank you very much.
Rolling in the aisles.
We're missing the boom follow that. I mean, actually, what the efficiency market is less that actually. What the efficiency market is, I mean, the joke gets tortured then, but it's if economists were walking down the same path every day, and every day there was a pound coin on the floor, people would say, no, eventually someone would realize, no, there's a pound coin there, and it wouldn't be there because someone would pick it up. So that's the idea of that. So let's go back to the Mentimeter thing for a moment, because I've got another question for you to think through about this issue. And it's, what are the practical implications of the I've written a question. It doesn't make any sense. What are the implications of the efficient markets hypothesis for investment? Is what I mean to say. Here we are. So this is the same same code again. So it's menti.com 907795. Forgive my garbled question here. What are the implications of the efficient markets hypothesis for investment? That's what it should say. Maybe you've got some slides. There is no shortcut for guaranteeing success. Absolutely right. In the long run, buying the index is optimal. That might be true. Money managers aren't worth the cost. Controversial. It's hard to outperform the market. Very hard to outperform the market. Equal opportunities for investors. Lack of investor confidence. Very good. Gives everyone the same starting point. All returns are similar. No divergent returns. Well, come back and think of that. Pick an index and stick to it. That's it sounds as though that's something someone's learned from long experience. What else have we got here? Focus on fundamental drivers of success. Thank you. You have to get lucky. Very important point. One of the main things you learn on MBA. You've got to get the opportunity to arbitrage is extremely short. Extremely short. Of course, lots of trading on the stock exchange doesn't happen over a cycle of months or weeks. It happens on the cycle of milliseconds, and that's one of the reasons why the idea of the gentleman or gentle lady academic wandering into the senior common room with a copy of the Financial Times to phone the stockbroker is no longer a viable option. You have to look for new opportunities every minute. Well, these are all very wise things to say here. Thank you for participating in this way. Yeah, stick to the basics. No difference in financial return from each index and its risk involved. That's a very fundamental part of economics. That's very interesting. We should continue considering suitable ways in each situation. These are all excellent comments. Very good. Let's see what else we've got here. Very good. Okay. Well, look, thank you very much for that. That's so the efficient markets hypothesis tells us that if anyone comes up to you and says, "Hey, I've got a great scheme for investing your money. Give me your money, and I'm going to invest it for you, Richard," the right thing to do is be extremely skeptical, because the chances that somebody can do that is very, very low indeed. I mean, I would say it's completely impossible. And of course, there are always people like Warren Buffett and George Soros who have seemed to have done amazingly well. But there's two elements to that. Firstly is Warren Buffett doesn't make money by gambling on the stock market. Warren Buffett makes money by investing in companies and holding those companies for a very long time. So he's not actually making money on the up and down in the stock market. He's making money on the secular growth of the economy and the wealth of the human race going up. That's really how he's making his money there. And Soros and other people, well, there is always going to be people who get lucky. So there will always be people who will do very well. There'll always be a huge distribution of success of investors. The trouble is, the prior investment performance doesn't give you a good indicator of future investment performance. And that affects the way people run banks and do selling and so forth. So that's an issue we're going to go back to now in thinking at the PowerPoint here. Here we are. Let's go back to this. So we've got this efficient markets hypothesis, and let's move on now to think about what the operations angles are here. Now, I should say Richard and I both teach operations and supply chain and turnaround and those sorts of things in the business school. But we ought to say a health warning, really. These subject areas don't really exist in the real world. In the real world, there's business problems, and we only divide them up into operations and marketing and finance cases and so forth, just for the convenience of timetabling at business schools, really. Publishers and academics are the people who want these silos. In real life, it's all tangled up. So although in a sense this is a finance case we're looking at, actually it's really an operations case. And let's think now about the operations of Farrington Janes and how they're going about doing things. So the first thing I want to talk about is a framework for understanding what's going on with this case study, which comes from one of our former colleagues, Terry Hill. a fellow at, well, what's now Green Templeton College, and one of the great thinkers in the field of operations management. And he has a really simple framework called the Winners and Qualifiers framework, which I'm going to explain in a minute. And Richard, perhaps you can help by chipping in to help me make the connection between this and the Farrington Janes case, because what I'm going to do is talk about other things in the Farrington Janes case for a few moments. And what we need to do is try and help the students make the connection with what's happened in that dining room in the college with what I'm going to talk about now.
Yep.
Okay, so what is the Terry Hill framework? Well, the first idea is that you can divide up the features of a product or a service that are good features of the product or service into two categories: qualifiers and winners. And the idea of a qualifier feature is something that you need to have in order to get in the game at all. If you don't have a qualifier up to a particular level, you can't play. You can't even get on the tender list. You can't even get your foot in the door. But the thing is about a qualifier is once you've crossed the threshold of performance on a qualifier dimension, it doesn't give you any benefit anymore. Winners, on the other hand, are the thing that once you're in the game will then differentiate you from the competition. So one is a kind of an entry ticket, and one is the way of actually winning the business. And if you don't have a qualifier up to the level, then you can lose business. And these things might change by different groups of customers and different times in a product life cycle. But let me give you some examples here now. Terry's approach, winners and qualifiers approach, was developed when he was doing his PhD in America, and he drew heavily on the psychology of hygiene factors. You may have come across that. But there's also another version of the same story here called Kano analysis, and you can see it's the same idea. A winner has, for more of a feature you've got, the better it is. But a qualifier, once you've got past a certain level, you don't get any extra benefit. So, so it's interesting to think in the Farrington Janes case, what are their winners and qualifiers? If you're trying to sell your investment services to a college, what's the college going to be looking for? Is it going to be, what's a winner? And I'll come back to that thought in a second. Let me give you an example to flesh this out. So when I was going to restaurants, before I had children, these are things that were important and less important to me. What was important was good food, great wine, and great ambience. That's same for you, Richard, you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, yeah. Less important to me when I was young was fast service because I had plenty of time. Cleanliness. I went to some dives, sometimes, but they were quite, great food, but a bit grubby. There's some places on the Cowley Road that are a bit like that in Oxford.
It's part of the ambience.
Pardon?
It's part of the ambience.
Part of the ambience, I suppose it would be. Yeah, the grittiness of it. Payphone. I put this in just to remind myself how old I was, and price. So because I had loads of money before children, so that was fine. And there's other things there that weren't important to me at all. But now, once I have children, then it all changes. Then I've got these things are really important to me. Cleanliness. I'm not going to take risks with my kids. Food's obviously still important. Price becomes important because I've got no money left. High chairs. I need to be able to put the kids, you've got a small child and you need high chairs to put them in. You want fast service because there's nothing like hungry children to drive you mad in a restaurant. Or if you're waiting a long time. And simple, really simple food. It's got to be nice food, but they've got to be able to give, fish fingers and chips and things like this to kids. Less important, Wi-Fi, I suppose. Time has moved on, so it's gone up a bit in my ranking there. And the other thing's not important at all. Wine, not important at all because you can't drink. That's the trouble with being responsible for small people. So anyway, that's it. But now that's saying things are important or not important. The thing about the Hill framework, the idea of winners and qualifiers, is it lets you look at the important lists and put them into two categories. So look, here I've got winners, and for me, the winners would be the great food and the price. But these things are qualifiers. If a restaurant doesn't have high chairs, I can't go there. But once it's got high chairs, I don't care about that. I don't care how many high chairs, as long as it's got enough, I don't care. If it could have a zillion high chairs, I wouldn't say, hey, let's go to this restaurant. They've got a particularly large selection of high chairs. I'm never going to say that. And I'm not really going to choose, I want it to be fast, but I don't need it to be lightning fast. You know, if they, you know, the difference between a minute and 4 seconds is not meaningful to me. I don't need to have food instantly. It's just got to be, you know, reasonably fast, and it's got to be clean. I don't need to be surgically clean. In fact, that would be a bit creepy if you know, if you had to sort of tog up in PPE to go and eat your meal. That would not work either. So there's this distinction between qualifiers and winners, and this is interesting if we start thinking about Farrington James, isn't it? Now, so maybe on the chat we could start thinking about what it is that Farrington James should be offering that would be a winner and a qualifier for selling their investment services. So now, is it going to be, well, let's think about some of the things. Is a brilliant investment performance actually what they're going to sell on? What do you think, Richard?
Well, it depends on the criteria of the investment committee, doesn't it?
It does. But look, imagine the investment committee are kind of pretty savvy economists, and they kind of understand that people aren't going to outperform the market. And if you get a good investment firm, probably they're going to do something roughly the same as the market.
Yep.
You might be trying to look for other things.
So we've got some suggestions on the chat. So
yeah,
Paul
let's have a look here.
Suggests a winner could be good performance, a qualifier not worse than the index.
Yeah.
So you might be looking at a baseline.
Yeah. Winner could be efficient. Yeah, these are excellent. Approach it. Very good. Preservation, limiting downside losses. That could be really important, couldn't it? I mean, if I'm buying investment services, probably what I want is to know that I want a return that is not going to be embarrassingly low. I'm going to be realistic that I'm not going to be able to buy super high investment performance because I believe in the efficient markets, or approximately believe in the efficient markets hypothesis. So as long as someone can give me approximately the right kind of signals about the return they can give, I can probably live with if it goes up and down a bit. I can, if they don't quite match the investment benchmark now and then, well, I can say, well, you know, as long as overall it's about that, that might be okay. But maybe what I really want is good service, and maybe there's a qualifier of professionalism that I need, because maybe I don't want to entrust my money to somebody who has got a kind of a crappy operation. Yeah, no, all these are brilliant. No, I'm sure you can see the stuff going on in the chat here. It's fantastic suggestions. Thank you for these things.
There was a particularly good one that did refer to the investment committee. So because this is a college investment committee,
yeah,
so some of the colleges have been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so their time horizon is very long indeed. So that idea of low risk is really, really important about how do we make sure this college still exists in 100, 200, 500 years time.
Yeah. So for that, actually, the idea of exactly hitting the best possible return might be a bit less important to me than knowing that the firm is competent and reliable and isn't going to screw up. I mean, what I don't want to do is lose all my money because they do something stupid. Yeah. And of course, when investment firms do something stupid, it might not be that they've gone to the races and put all the money on a horse. It's more likely to be the fact that their internal business processes are rubbish and they failed in some way of doing this. So this is a moment of revelation, I think, because you might think, wouldn't you, that running a bank or running an investment company is all about being a clever investor. But actually, it might not be at all about that. It might be only a little bit about that. And it might be much more about being a service company and about having really robust and reliable processes. So if you're selling Farrington James services, maybe you need to think about other things. Let's go back and think about.
Just to pick up on that, so San Hong was the one who talked about the college being over 100 years old.
Yeah.
But you'll also find that Felix had a very good one that was an order qualifier, being that the numbers and tables were correct. Just your point.
Exactly correct. You're going to rely on your investment manager, aren't you, to provide you with reports of what you've done. And you want those reports to be always completely accurate. You don't want any doubt about the numbers they're giving you being incorrect or not really checked through. And so let's just think about what's going on here. We've got a business process going on here for the Ferrington James sales operation. Someone's creating a slide deck. They check it first time they use it, and they use it. And then as time goes on, it goes on from year to year, they're using the same slides and they're updating it. And maybe when they've updated the slide, someone hasn't checked that actually what it's saying now is not what they would really like it to say. I mean, I'm sure they've got to be honest with their clients, but it might not be the slide you're going to put up to say, invest with us because we're great, when the slide says it's not. So it's not they've got to change the numbers, but they've got to find a different way of presenting it. So that could be it, couldn't it? It could be that there's not a failure in that checking business process. Or, and this is what I suspect has happened in this case, is actually there just wasn't a checking process. And this is a pretty interesting thing to me, is what we see in all sorts of businesses is people do things, but they don't convert it into an organized business process where there's proper approaches to quality control. And there's a couple of really important ideas about quality control that we can take from other sectors of the world. And what we want to do is have an organization where these kind of problems get picked up straight away. So now the one that we talk about a lot on the course, and one of the most interesting ideas of picking up these problems is Toyota. And although Toyota make cars, probably Toyota's greatest contribution to the world is not the cars they've made, but the Toyota production system, which is an approach to running business processes where when things go wrong, you pull a cord and stop the process, and it becomes easy to detect issues. And maybe if we think about the Ferrington James case through that lens, it's not so much about investment performance, it's about a business process. And this is the bit where Ferrington James may have fallen over. Okay, look, we're probably out of time now. What I hope we've done is give you a tiny taste of the idea of how learning at business schools kind of works. You get to think about cases, you get to bring ideas together, you get to discuss things. None of the things we look at in business schools are simple or straightforward. None of them have formulaic answers. Everything pulls together lots of bits of our experience together. And what we hope is that when you come to study here, you'll be able to bring your prior experience as well. And that discussion thing that we've not been able to engineer today will be exactly the thing that we can make the most of. Richard, do you want to add anything about what we've been able to do today? I mean, it's a kind of a simulation of what we do, really, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it's been a good simulation. It's been an idea. It's shown how all of these issues, apparently simple, once you start pulling them apart, there's actually quite a lot of complexity underneath. Yeah. And I think your last point about this isn't a lecture. It's not about somebody standing up front and just, here's the knowledge, now you go away and apply it. It is very much an interaction. And I think in all of our teaching sessions, there's a lot of interaction, not only between the member of faculty and the students, but also the students amongst themselves as well, because they all have different experiences. And it's one of the joys of Oxford that there's such a diverse group of students as well.
Yeah.
So you really get different thinking.
Yeah, and maybe I'd add the fact that what we've discovered, since March, since we've entered into this crazy COVID-19 world, is what we've discovered is that what we did instinctively anyway, which is to interact with people in small groups, is becoming the basis for how we do our online education as well. So although periodically we have to make use of recorded lectures that people watch asynchronously, the core of what we do is about interaction and dialogue and exchange and groups and those sorts of things. And as we go forward, although no one's has any idea about how the pandemic is going to play out, what we know is that in our operating model, what we're going to do is stick to that principle of having interactive education, even if some of that ends up having to be mediated in the near term by doing things online. We're still going to find better ways to do this. In a real group, we'd be using breakout rooms and we'd be seeing people's faces and having multiple way conversations all the time. Thank you ever so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. We really hope we get to see you in real life and very soon indeed. Misha or others, I don't know if you want to come and close off, but we're just about done now.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you so much, Steve and Richard. That was really great and very entertaining. So that concludes our final session for the virtual Oxford MBA Open Day. I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's joined us for all or some of the sessions. I really hope you've enjoyed them and found them informative and useful. All of the recordings will be sent to you via email over the next few days, and they will also be made available on our Side Business School YouTube channel, so please do check them out too. Please do keep in touch with us via email as well. I've just popped our email address in the chat now. So it's the Oxford MBA at sbs.ox.ac.uk. We very much look forward to hearing from you and hopefully welcoming you onto campus sometime in the near future. So thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe, and I hope you all have wonderful weekends ahead.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.